has a vision of the world as ruined, complete civilizational collapse. Here is a picture of urban space prior to gentrification. Bliss it was to be alive in that dawn. A space of crime and inverted consumerism. Tramps wear diamonds, silver fox fur becomes leg warmers, heraldic emblems of jewels become rich, trash to be draped around freakish peoploids. 7. Les tricoteurs. Les tricoteurs. Bowie's albums often have traces of musical styles that are being abandoned, like outworn skins, alongside the premonition of something new that will find voice in future work. In Diamond Dogs, Rebel Rebel and Rock and Roll With Me belong to that past, and arguably the soulful Isaac Hayes-influenced wah-wah guitar of 1984 points forward towards the white soul of young Americans. But the real innovations on Diamond Dogs are the 9-minute sequence of Sweet Thing, Candida, and Sweet Thing Reprise, and the nightmarishly brilliant We Are the Dead. We could also make a good case for the chant of the ever-circling Skeletal Family. And on the original vinyl version of Diamond Dogs that I owned in the 1970s, the needle would get stuck at the end of the track, emitting an endless and increasingly disturbing noise, which I'm going to try and do. I'm not exactly Mr. Technology. In the dead Diamond Dog world of Halloween Jack, one of the personae on the album, sex is no longer some transgressive excitement. It is putting pain in a stranger. Its image, like a Bacon painting, is a portrait in flesh who trails on a leash. If this is a world of flesh, then that flesh is dying. We find here an almost paranoid schizophrenic picture of the world as extinct, rotting and in need of redemption. This is the kind of world that we find in President Schreiber's Delicious Delusions, or the inhabitants of R.D. Laing's Kingsley Hall Free Asylum in London in the late 1960s. Can't you tell I'm dead? I can smell the flesh rotting. Perhaps there is also some memory of the world of Bowie's schizophrenic half-brother, Terry Burns, from whom he learnt so much so early, and who somehow thought, Terry, that David could save him after he had been institutionalized in a mental hospital for many years. Terry killed himself in the final days of 1984, and Bowie set off a family feud and media storm by not attending the funeral. He didn't want to turn it into a circus. It's often been said that there is something of the psychotic in Bowie, which I rather doubt. Bowie was not a lad insane. If such psychotic tendencies exist, then, as with Joyce in Finnegan's Wake, they're sublimated into art. Thanks to his art, maybe he's not crazy. Maybe we're not crazy too. Crazy that's in your head, art can help, right? The constant references to madness, paranoia, and delusion, particularly in the early tracks on The Man Who Sold the World, are a musical transformation of the terrors of madness. Even the crazy closing canine chant to all the madmen. Zane, 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 ouvrez le chien. Zane, 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 open the dog. I know what it means. Open the dog. Open the dog. That said, a mad dead half-brother is a kind of shadow figure and a history of madness in a family, as was the case with Bowie's mother. Margaret Mary Burns is a terrifying thing. We are the dead. The air is full of their cries. Is it nice in your snowstorm, freezing your brain? Bowie asks. It's the exhilarating bleakness of Bowie's vision in Diamond Dogs that pulls me in with its dirty claws. As the protagonist in Candida walks through the film set that even smells like a street, he boasts, someone scrawled on the walls, I smell the blood of les tricoteurs, who wrote up scandals in other bars. I won't do this, I'll mess it up. Les tricoteurs were the insurrectionary working-class Parisian women who watched and cheered on the executions during the terror of 1793-94 and watched the surgically precise work of Madame Guillotine. Candida builds with a terrifying lyrical force, painting the picture of a world of exploitation, decay, and rape. Till the sun beats love on the seedy young knights who press you on the ground while shaking in fright. The world is a prostituted sexual hell defined by random ultraviolence. The song ends plaintively and desperately. I guess we could cruise down one more time. With you by my side, it would be fine. We'll buy some drugs and watch a band and jump in the river holding hands. I'll play that bit. The only possible connection in a desperate, ruined world, the sole remainder of love, is to take some packs and take some drugs and carry out a suicide pact, rather like Kleist. In a loveless world, love can only be saved through death. 8. The majesty of the absurd. I want to go back to the allusion to les tricoteurs and make a little leap, or at least take a small step. When I listen to Diamond Dogs and think about Bowie's dystopian vision, I think of Georg Büchner and Georg Büchner's Danton's Death, Danton's Tod. This extraordinary work is defined by a post-revolutionary sense of despair, inaction, and pervasive nihilism. Just prior to his execution, the imprisoned Danton says, "Everything is packed and swarming. The void has destroyed itself. Creation is its wound. We are its drops of blood, and the world the grave in which it rots." I'm going to read that again. Everything is packed and swarming. The void has destroyed itself. Creation is its wound. We are its drops of blood, and the world the grave in which it rots. Such, I think, is Bowie's dystopia, defined by Enlightenment's deadly dialectic. We declare that God is dead and turn ourselves into gods only in order to kill better, to exterminate more effectively. We have become heathen. Danton goes on, the world is chaos. Nothingness is the world God waiting yet to be born. Danton's Death, this play, this extraordinary play by Büchner, ends with Lucille, most Ophelia-like, mounting the steps of the guillotine where the guards are sleeping. And she shouts, "Long live the king." It's the play, and she mounts the guillotine and says, "Long live the king, es lebe der König." It seems like a suicidal gesture, and one imagines that she is swiftly dispatched, although Büchner leaves the audience to draw that inference. Yet, Paul Celan, in his justly famous Meridian speech, given when accepting the Büchner Prize in 1960, finds another meaning to Lucille's words. He insists that these words, "Long live the king," it is an act of freedom, Celan says. It is a step. If that step might appear to be a reactionary defense of the Ancien Régime, then Celan counters. This is an amazing quote from Celan. It is not. Is it a reactionary step? It is not. Allow me, Celan says, who grew up on the writings of Peter Kropotkin and Gustav Landauer, to insist this is not homage to any monarchy, to any yesterday worth preserving. It's homage to the majesty of the absurd, which bespeaks the presence of human beings. This, ladies and gentlemen, has no definitive name, but I believe that this is poetry. Fascinatingly, Celan places Lucille's act under the aegis of Kropotkin's anarchism of mutual aid and Landauer's more heady mystical anarchism. Slightly further on, Celan asks adds what he calls a topological dimension to his thought. To take Lucille's step is to see things, he says, in a utopian light. Therefore, the act of freedom, which is poetry, is utopian. We came close, Celan says, to a free, open space and finally to utopia. It puts one in mind of that quotation from Oscar Wilde, the famous quotation that any map of the world that does not include utopia is useless because it doesn't include that place that human beings keep coming to, right? Keep arriving at. Poetry is a step, an act of freedom taken in relation to a world defined by the majesty of the absurd, a human world. Thus, Buchner's dystopia is the condition for utopia. My only real thesis in this inquiry into Bowie is that his art is also such a step. It sets us free in relation to a civilization that is essentially dead. One does not fix up a house that's falling off a cliff. Bowie's dystopia is utopian in equal measure. The dystopia is utopian. I think that this thought casts a different light on Bowie's vision of the world and world politics. Consider a track like the stunning It's No Game, which appears in two versions, part 1 and part 2, as bookends to Scary Monsters. Amazingly, Tony Visconti, the producer, revealed that both versions have the same backing track, although at that point the similarities end. Where the second version is flat, direct, and affectless with a longer lyric, the first version features Bowie at his most histrionic, accompanied by a menacing voiceover in Japanese by Michi Hirota and an insane guitar part by Robert Fripp. The track finishes with Bowie screaming, "Shut up," over Fripp's seemingly endless, repeated guitar riff. Let's listen to a little tiny bit of this. This is It's No Game, part 1. I'll just play the beginning and the end. Can't go any louder, can it? The sense of the flavour of it, right? It finishes with this. What Bowie describes is a Buchnerian world of terror. The first line, love that track. The first line, "Silhouettes and shadows watch the revolution," describes the languor and disappointment of a post-revolutionary situation. In allusion to Eddie Cochran's posthumously released 1960 hit, "There are no longer 3 steps to heaven. All that remains are big heads and drums, full speed and pagan." And then Bowie says, "So where's the moral?" And he goes on, "People have their fingers broken." And then in the final verse of part 2, Bowie concludes, "Children round the world put camel shit on the walls. They're making carpets on treadmills or garbage sorting." So where's the moral in camel shit? Pop stars like the dreadful Bono are meant to morph into slimmer versions of the dreadful Salman Rushdie and mouth liberal platitudes about the state of the world and what we can do to put it right. But here Bowie gives the lie to such liberal complacency by exposing it to a simple, visceral critique. The inexpensive carpets that we use to furnish our home are made by those living in camel shit huts. Rather than amuse ourselves with playing with some fraudulent political agenda, Bowie simply declares that it's no game. Shit is serious. The next track on Scary Monsters is Up the Hill Backwards, and it begins the vacuum created by the arrival of freedom and the possibilities it seems to offer. Like Lucille's cry at the end of Danton's Death, this line sounds like Edmund Burke's conservative critique of the French Revolution. But adapting Celan's logic, there is no homage to any monarchy or any yesterday, apart from the majesty of the absurd, which is the world of human beings. Such is poetry in Celan's sense, Bowie's poetry. 9. Sun, fire, rain, me, and you. Something beautiful and completely unexpected happened on the morning of Tuesday, the 8th of January 2013, Bowie's 66th birthday. I got out of bed in the blank cold of the Brooklyn midwinter to find messages from my old Bowie fan friends Keith Ansel Pearson and John Simmons. A new Bowie song with a stunning video by Tony Ursula had just been dropped onto the internet without any announcement. I could switch this around, right? A new Bowie song with a stunning video by Tony Ursula had just been dropped onto the internet without any announcement. I watched Where Are We Now in quiet disbelief. The song was number 1 on iTunes in the UK by 3 p.m. in the afternoon. The song is about the past, specifically his time in Berlin in the late 1970s, his most fecund creative period. Bowie himself once admitted in an interview that nothing else he recorded comes close to the work of those years, 76, 77, 78. Where Are We Now is an episodic act of memory, a scattering of fragments brought together through the naming of places like Potsdamer Platz, the Dschungel nightclub, Cardozo department store, and the Börsebrücke, a former border crossing between East and West Berlin. Bowie is, as he says, a man lost in time who is walking the dead. I can't begin to explain the effect this video had on me, together with the prospect of a new album, The Next Day, whose cover is an iconoclastic obliteration of the 1977 cover of Heroes. The album was released on March the 8th, 2013, a pre-ordered item that silently inserted itself on my iPhone on the morning of that day. Of course, the amazing thing is that this album exists at all, but it helps that it's really good. I mean, it made me happy. Bowie was not dead yet. Far from it, nor were we, as long as there was sun, rain, fire, me, and you. Bowie released 4 fascinating videos to accompany The Next Day, but there have been no interviews, no announcement of tour dates, no explanation, and no media froth. The only thing that Bowie has released since the appearance of The Next Day were 42 words, left justified in an email to the novelist Rick Moody. And those words are words like effigies, nerve, tragic, osmosis, iconoclasm, and so on and so forth. That's it, 42 words. But that's what's so beautiful about it. I don't need a David Bowie that appears on dumb chat shows with uninformed and disrespectful hosts chatting in his best cheeky Cockney accent and studied evasion, but I do need his music. One recent final memory. The other big Bowie event in 2013 was the show David Bowie Is, an exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which ran from March the 23rd to August the 11th last year. It then went to other places. It's in Chicago in September. It's in Berlin at the moment. It was in Sao Paulo. It's in Paris in the spring next year. When I turned up at the V&A one morning in early June last year, just after being at EGS, the line was so long that I eventually gave up trying to get in. But then I found a way of sneaking in without paying by following closely behind a couple of special guests. I don't know who they were, a woman and her child, who were being escorted past the guards and into the exhibition space. Looking rather like an older version of the Holy Family, I just tagged along slowly and kept my head down and got in. What was amazing was the amount of stuff that Bowie had preserved, even the keys to his apartment in Berlin from 1977. I mean, who does that? The climax of the exhibition was a huge room with a plethora of video material extending around 3 walls, featuring fragments of live performances going back to the 1970s. The place was packed. Luckily, I found a seat and sat there for 40 minutes, soaking in the end of one cycle of videos and the entirety of the next. It finished appropriately enough with Rock and Roll Suicide, maybe from the Hammersmith Odeon performance in July 1973. Then the song ended, the lights came up, and around me people were just smiling. They were just happy, wonderful. Oh no, love, you're not alone. I don't want Bowie to stop, but he will, and so will I. But not before showing you this video, Where Are We Now? You've probably seen it, but if you've not, this bit's good. It's got that moment in The Man Who Fell to Earth when you see him looking in the mirror. It's a strange kind of moment. And then a film by Tony Osler. If you know Tony Osler's other work, it's very much in his style. That's it.